This is my second and final video which I will be creating as part of my music magazine industry research. In this video I will be expanding on the research I have done previously in my first video by expanding on the demographic readership of 3 magazines mentioned previously. I will then detail how each of these magazines targets these audiences with reference to the magazine's content, and in the process of doing this, find the circulation figures for these 3 magazines. Then, finally, following this, I will go on to tell you how all 6 magazines looked at previously in the first video use the process of synergy to sell their individual brand names. The first magazine I have chosen to look at is Kerrang! To start with, Kerrang! Has an average circulation figure of 41,125 copies per issue, and we've already established it is a general rock and indie rock magazine, which would therefore cater to a large audience of rock and indie music lovers. However, to expand on this, we need to look at the main age groups in which this social culture is involved, and this social culture is mainly present among teenagers and young adults. The reason I am then stating that teenagers and young adults are the target demographic for this magazine is directly due to the content on the cover of the magazine, which usually involves an iconic rebellious figure in which this age group look up to, basically an ideal self, and the general feel of the various elements on the front cover, whether it be text or visual elements, which scream nonconformity, which is something that these age groups desperately strive for. Also, finally, the last reason I am stating this claim is that the articles in Kerrang! Usually involve young bands alongside older ones too, so it would relate more as a magazine, article-wise, to these 2 specific target demographics than, let's say, to a middle-aged adult. Moving on to my second magazine choice, which is NME, we see a similar picture to that of Kerrang! In terms of audience demographics, as the audience demographic specifically for this magazine, apart from rock music lovers, is once again teenagers and young adults. The reason this time I am stating this is because you have the same iconic, rebellious ideal self on the front cover, and in some cases for their opposite sex, an ideal partner. And also, on the front cover, the name of the magazine itself, although in the form of an initialism, New Musical Express, has connotations of the fast-paced lifestyles of this target demographic, and also, through the word new, we see that this magazine is clearly targeted at this age range, as they feature the latest bands, etc. in this magazine, which, like I said about Kerrang!, is more relatable to this target demographic than other target demographics, such as middle-aged people. Finally, to round this section of my video up, as NME is a monthly magazine, it has an average circulation of 4,329,326 copies per issue. The final magazine's demographic readership I am expanding on is IPC Media's Guitar and Bass magazine, which, like I have stated previously in my last video, has an average circulation of 12,175 copies per issue. Now, the reason this magazine is different to the others I have studied is that although it features artists and bands which relate to guitars, the dominant focus of this magazine is on guitars themselves, and this then means that this magazine specifically targets an audience who like and/or play guitars, and this is conveyed through the name of the magazine itself, Guitar and Bass, the often dominant image of a guitar on the front cover, which is portrayed as an ideal possession, and finally the articles themselves, which are focused mostly on guitars and how to play them. Now I'm going to move on to the last section of my video, which is how the 6 magazines I have researched use the process of synergy to sell their brand names. This process of synergy is utilised by these 6 magazines to sell their individual brand names in the same way, but on different scales. They are all cross-media products, and they use these different media formats as one to sell their brand name by people becoming dependent on that particular brand name for a particular service. Kerrang and Q utilise the television, the radio and the internet to reach a much wider audience demographic than what would be achieved by just being a magazine. And finally, Mojo, NME, Guitar and Bass and Uncut all utilise the internet, and although they only utilise this one extra form of media, their potential demographic audience has increased, and as such the public's dependency on them has as well. This then brings me to the end of my music magazine industry research.